Are you aware of what you have to contribute to the world today that is way beyond and way more important than your money? Your money is great. It's a tool. It's a blessing. There are many glories that can come of that. There's many depravities that can come from that. Be aware of that, aware of what money reveals about your true idols, so that you then can go out and actually really make a game-changing contribution to the world around you. It's not just about your money. That's what I would say to the wealthy person.
Most people think fundraising is about asking for money, but in truth, it's about something far more personal. Your posture, your relationship with wealth, and whether you can sit across from a successful person with respect, not suspicion, not insecurity, and not resentment. In this episode of You Are What You Give, I'm joined by J. Paul Fridenmaker, a longtime major gifts leader and coach who has spent decades in the world of Christian, faith-driven giving. And whatever your faith community might be, his insights land because they aren't theory, they're lived. He talks candidly about burnout, rejection, and the internal work that fundraisers have to do if they want to stay healthy and effective. You'll hear why he says that the ask is coachable, but networking and connecting are the true DNA test. You'll hear how one moment in 2001, giving a donor away, so to speak, to someone else, turned into a 25-year relationship of trust. And you'll hear why the best fundraisers aren't chasing gifts. They're inviting people to the party. Let's jump in. J. Paul, such an honor and opportunity to have you on our program. Thank you so much for giving of your time to join us on You Are What You Give.
I am so glad to be here, Avi. I'm just glad to talk to you. I don't care if anybody listens. We can just have a conversation.
I do hope that the conversation between us is going to carry some value for others as well.
There you go. I agree.
You know,
Yeah.
J. Paul, I've spoken to quite a number of people over the years, and although this podcast is relatively new, it's hard to find someone who not only is an expert on major gift fundraising, but has a specific characteristic that I remember one of our first conversations you mentioned and has stuck with me. You said something to the effect of, you actually enjoy fundraising.
Yeah, that's true. I do. And I'll go back to the beginning of my career in the mid-90s. I love sales. And so I was working for MetLife Insurance Company, but I also had kind of this pastor's heart. I wanted to be in ministry, and somebody came to me and said, hey, you know, there's this role in nonprofits where you get to be involved in sales and you get to be involved in this really cool mission. And I was like, great, sign me up. Well, that was fundraising. And so I am kind of one of those odd people that I joke that when God was passing out insecurity about rejection, I must have been taking a nap. But I really do enjoy it. And that's not to say that I don't have my hard days. You know, I have days where I feel humiliated or I feel insecure, of course. But yeah, I really do love it.
So first of all, I remember also at the time, I think you said that you enjoy fundraising because no one ever told you that you shouldn't. And there's something about the fundraising industry that you talk about, that rejection, and I want to circle back to that. But first, let's just begin with the big questions of how can we get into the mind of the fundraiser, and perhaps through the mind of the fundraiser, get into the mind of the donor. And what I'm referring to is, you know, we've got a community of people that are on the nonprofit spectrum, whether they're the givers, the benefactors, or they're the impact agents, the people like the fundraisers or the program operators, the people who are running the operations and making things happen. And I think everyone's really interested, challenged by what goes through the experience of the fundraiser. So before you give us kind of those solutions or some of those tips to make major gift fundraising more effective, perhaps you'll help us understand what are the challenges that those fundraisers are facing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably the biggest challenge starts with an internal challenge. And that is, what is your own relationship with wealth, with money, with success, all of those things? Because as a fundraiser, your primary target audience are people who are doing well in those things. people who have a lot of money, people, at least by outward appearances, people who have a lot of success. And so if you enter into that journey or that process feeling insecure or hostile or jealous or suspicious, all of those things, right at the get-go, you're going to have problems. And so what I say to people is to do well, a starting point is to work on the internal. And there's a text by Henry Nouwen that I'll probably mention more than a couple of times in this conversation called A Spirituality of Fundraising. And when I'm coaching people and doing training and stuff, that text is a prerequisite. And one of the things I love about it is Henry says, if you start with prayer, before you go out into your day, Creator, help me to be hospitable rather than hostile. Help me to be gracious rather than suspicious. Help me to be loving rather than jealous. Like all of those things are super, super important. Because the mind of a fundraiser, the core of a fundraiser, we're competitive people. We want to win the day. We want to do deals. I want to do deals for the kingdom. Well, I have to kind of pause for a second and look internally at my posture before I actually go out and start inviting people. So that's a big deal. Yeah.
I mean, have you seen situations, because I know you're coaching people, and in addition to your own personal career and the work that you've done with Major Gift Fundraising, you're helping people along their journey. Have you heard of like kind of these crash and burn situations where maybe, I mean, for the observer, is it possible that there's somebody who goes into that kind of a conversation so mismatched that they're hostile towards the person they're looking to cultivate a gift from?
Yeah, that is rare that it gets that bad, but that does happen. And it probably happens, honestly, for people who have been in the industry for a longer period of time. And you just kind of get to this point where you kind of feel fed up with the power imbalance. And so you come in hot, and that's never going to work. I think the bigger issue is coming in feeling sheepish and insecure about the conversation that you're getting ready to engage in. That's also exhausting. And I think that's why we see a lot of burnout in the fundraising profession. It's combined with you get tons of pressure from your leadership, from the board. You've been brought in as kind of this sniper, this maverick who's going to come in and raise money, and it's a lot of pressure. And so all of those things can kind of converge to create this perfect storm that can cause people to burn out. So the first part of it, of where you actually become belligerent with givers and stuff like that, is more rare, but it can happen as well if you're not careful.
Yeah, I had recently a conversation with a donor, a very generous donor, who spoke to me about her experiences sometimes, not on one occasion, more than one occasion, where people will sound resentful when they get a no.
Yeah.
And so,
oh man,
how do people graciously receive a no?
So the first thing is to always remember going into it, you're not the only thing that people are giving to. I mean, it's kind of a no duh, but it's I have to remind myself after 30 years, I'm not the only thing. The other thing is, I have a really cool mission, but just because somebody thinks that they're not vibing with it or they don't want to give to it, does not mean that they're stupid, right? It doesn't mean that they are intellectually inferior because they don't understand how great my mission is. And so what I do instead is I go in with a posture that says, okay, if it's not happening, first of all, I try to really tune up my awareness skills and be aware. And if it's not happening, to say, okay, what is God doing in this person's life? What does get them excited? And can I actually help them get connected to that thing? So my posture is to give away the giver. I have a great network. I have all kinds of things happening all over the world. If they're interested in something that is really far afield from what I'm talking about, I pivot the conversation to helping connect them, if they want to that thing, and really to serve them in that way.
I actually think, Jay Paul, if I may, I think that's actually a great example of being gracious. And first of all, I had personally in major gift cultivation, I've had the opportunity often to work in contexts where there's more than one product, if you will, or giving opportunity on offer. And so the broader the set of opportunities or offerings to the donor, oftentimes you can pivot within the conversation. So that's kind of not always available to the person who's doing the fundraising, but when
Not
available,
always. That's right.
there's some latitude there. But I think you make a great point, and I also find that really donors they're not ATM machines. They're not just there to push a couple of buttons and take a withdrawal, right? These are real people. And if you want to build that mutual respect with the person in the other side of the conversation, you actually really you want to give them value. And if you can give them value and say, you know what, I guess this conversation is not for you, but you need to meet my friend. And this is so hard for, I think, people even in business, but certainly in the nonprofit world where there's the scarcity mindset and it's either me or him and it's the zero sum game. And if the donor goes and gives to the other guy, he's not going to give to me. I actually personally think that that's not the case. I think that oftentimes the real person there says, wow, you're you've got some real character here. I appreciate that you've given me some value. At least I'll take the meeting next time you call. Has that been your experience?
I have a real example of this, Avi. So in 2001, I was going to meet with one of our major givers. I was working for a small missions organization. And this family had given us a lot of money already. And he knew that I was coming to visit with him to ask for another gift. He didn't know how much. I was going to ask him for $50,000, which was lower than some of the gifts they'd given. As I was talking with him, here's what he said to me. He goes, I asked him, how's business? How's family? And he said, it's interesting. My wife has started to become more interested in our giving. So to this point, it was mostly him and his sons who made the giving decisions. And he had shared with me that it was a little bit disconcerting to him that she wasn't as involved. And so I responded and I said, well, this is great. We've been praying for this, that she would be more involved. And he smiled and he goes, yeah. He goes, well, she's not as interested in the things that me and the boys are interested in. And immediately my radars went up. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. I think this is a moment where I pause my agenda and delve into his and her agenda. And so I said to him, I said, this is going to sound funny to you, but let's talk about what she's interested in. And I'll just say his name is John for the sake of the podcast. I said, John, let's get you guys connected to some things that she's really excited about for this next season of giving. And I mean, this is a strong business guy. He actually became emotional, which surprised me. I mean, Avi, I was winging it. I was not planning for any of this, but we ended up finding other avenues for them to give the 50,000 that I wanted him to give to me. We gave it away to things she was excited about. Now, that was 2001. 2 years ago, that family invited me to facilitate a journey of generosity retreat with 3 generations, him and his wife, their kids, and their kids. That relationship, again, I didn't plan for this or orchestrate. I'm just telling you that my decision to do that, which was scary in the moment, ended up creating a lifelong friendship of trust. They've called me many times over the years to ask my opinion about things that they're giving to because they know that I'm going to speak with their interest at heart. And so that taught me a lot. It was actually quite humbling because I realized that when we take that posture doesn't have a quick return on investment, but it is super, super important to long-term productivity and enjoyment in this profession.
You know, Jay Paul, what you're saying, I think, is so encouraging to people who are in the fundraising field. And I, you know, I'm just thinking about a quarter of a century here of history with a family. And they call you up 25 years after the fact that you told them, hey, don't give to me, give to somebody else. And they said, hey, guess what? We that registered with us 25 years later. We want you to walk us through through our giving journey. And that I think that's fascinating, hopefully encouraging to people. But J. Paul, that is a long haul. What the message in that is that this call fundraising, resource development, whatever term you want to attach to it, that's going to be a relational with the people, not necessarily exclusively with the organization that you represent, but with the people who you're serving most directly, which are the donors themselves. And that sometimes the organizations need to understand that. And then secondarily, what is the message to somebody who maybe doesn't have the, I don't know, that commitment, maybe might be burning out? Is there a situation where somebody is maybe not cut out for this industry?
Yeah, definitely. And my answer to that is if you well, let me use an analogy first. Okay, if you come to me and say, "J. Paul, I want to learn how to play the guitar." I'm like, "Awesome. The guitar is super easy to learn. It's tough to master, super easy to learn. I'm going to teach you three chords and you will be able to play hundreds of songs. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about your enjoyment of music. What kind of music do you enjoy? What do you listen to?" And if their response to me is, I don't know. I mean, I don't really love music all that much, but I'm just kind of want to be cool and play the guitar. I'm like, why don't you go find something else to do? Because the enjoyment of music is essential, I think, to really learning how to play guitar and then being good at it and not maybe being the best. Okay. In fundraising, that same analogy is networking and connecting. Okay. So what I say to people is, tell me about networking and connecting. Do you enjoy it? What do you enjoy about it? Tell me some wins that you've had in networking and connecting. If somebody comes back to me and says, man, I don't enjoy that very much. I'm not very good at it. I don't, it's not what I think of first. I tend to focus more on the details of the mission or whatever the case may be. I typically nip it in the bud quickly and say, you know what? This might not be for you because this job is all about networking and connecting. I recently have said to people, reach out to three people every day. I want you to reach out to three people a day. That is your starting point. If that doesn't excite you, if that exhausts you before you even get started, if you want to lay down and take a nap, I'm like, not a good idea. Because networking and connecting is hard to coach. Now, if you enjoy networking and connecting, I can coach you or other people can coach you how to do the ask. The ask is very coachable. Networking and connecting, not so much. You kind of either have it or you don't. So that's the core thing that I tell people.
That's cool. So you're saying the DNA of the fundraiser, the successful major gift fundraiser, they've got to be a networker, they've got to be a connector, and then the ask, which is what people are most afraid of, that might come more easily.
Yes, it comes a lot more easily than people think, Avi. In fact, I wrote a blog post about this some time ago, and I reposted it here recently, where I gave I gave 32 styles of asking based on the Myers-Briggs. So 30 or 16 styles of asking for introverts and 16 styles of asking for extroverts. And my point in doing this is you can find your mojo. You don't have to be J. Paul, right? I have a certain style of how I approach somebody, how I invite them to consider something. You don't have to be like that. You don't have to be charismatic. You don't have to be this really funny, kind of engaging person. You can find your comfort level based on your personality for how you invite people. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to be scary and it's still hard work, but what I try to encourage people, we kind of think of, well, there's this one kind of extroverted, charismatic style, vision casting, all this stuff that needs to be present in the ask, and that's just simply not true. It
That's
really
amazing.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you say that the introvert can be a very successful fundraiser.
Yes, I'm a high introvert, by the way. That's going to surprise probably everybody listening to this because I'm
Including
so
me.
excited to talk to you right now. But that's the thing. As an introvert, I'm like, I want to talk to Avi right now. I don't care who else is listening. I mean, that's a classic introvert thing. But I actually am a high introvert. So I've had to find my specific enjoyment of how I call it inviting people to the party. How do I invite people to the party as J. Paul, as the way that God made me, that is both enjoyable for me and honors the person sitting across from me?
So I love what you're talking about with inviting people to the party, right? That's a core proposition when it comes to asking people for financial support or perhaps other forms of engagement with an organization. In my experience, I've also had the luxury when doing fundraising, I've actually never seen myself as a fundraiser. I've always seen myself, call it a social entrepreneur, someone who wants to bring something into the world and make it happen, whether it's my own project or something that I'm doing for another organization and supporting them. If I don't believe in the project, this is like for me another piece that I think is really critical. You talked about loving the guitar or loving music in order to be able to really get the guitar. If I'm not fired up about the project, I'm not selling it. And I'm not the one who's going to sell snow to the Eskimo. If I could theoretically take a certain skill set and put it into that kind of a track, I would not be interested in doing it. I probably couldn't sell the snow to the Eskimo because I'm not fired up about snow. I love
That's
snow,
right.
but not that much.
Yeah, exactly. No, that is so true. I mean, I think that is the other thing, networking and connecting. And then do you believe truly in the thing that you are inviting people to? That those two things are so essential. But I like that posture. The reason I say inviting people to the party is okay. My beloved Seahawks just won the NFC Championship. Boom, baby. Okay, they're going to the Super Bowl. Okay, I'm going to have a Super Bowl party. I love American football. So I'm going to start inviting people. I'm excited to invite people to my party. So I call up Avi and I'm like, Avi, I want you to come to my Super Bowl party. And you're like, J. Paul, first of all, I'm across the ocean. Second of all, I don't really like American football. Third of all, blah, 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 all this stuff. Now, I am not going to feel bad about that because I'm like, of course, this isn't Avi's thing. That's okay. We're still friends. Our friendship goes beyond the invitation that I just gave you. And so there's this posture, and most people can go, oh, okay, yeah, if I invite people to my party and they can't come because of schedule or because they don't like that kind of play that we're going to do or they don't blah, 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 whatever, that's understandable. No hard feelings, right? We'll do something else together another time. Well, that posture is very attractive when I'm sitting across from somebody and saying, the pressure is off. If you say no to this, I'm not going to bemoan you. If you say yes to it, I'm not going to pander to you. It's just a thing that I'm inviting you to that is really cool. And so there's that. If you can kind of find that posture or that mojo, it helps so much.
But that's great advice to the fundraiser. I want to take this kind of in a different direction for a moment, though, because sometimes it seems like it's almost tragic that so much fundraising has to go on, right? Because we're talking about the world of nonprofit. So, and nonprofit doesn't mean that there shouldn't be money coming to the organization from other means. It doesn't have to be from the private donor or the grant making foundation or whatever the case may be. But still, this scarcity mindset again, where people, it almost seems that sometimes the mission might, in this kind of danger zone, find itself following the money instead of the money finding its way to the mission. And you've got these wonderful founders, and they wake up in the morning fired up about doing good for the community, doing good for the world, whatever it might be. And then they get stuck because they're just not cut out for fundraising. I mean, I think it's just the way that it is. How do people overcome that?
So I think the number one way you overcome it is through some simple systems, honestly. James Clear wrote this great book, Atomic Habits. You and your listeners probably heard of it. He has a quote in there that says, You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Okay? There are, what I say about major gift fundraising, it is not rocket science, but it is hard work. Okay? There are two or three systems that you have got to be paying attention to when you wake up on Monday morning. And if doing that is a deal breaker for you, then we go back to our earlier part of our conversation where I'm saying, then probably this isn't the best idea for you. I don't care how excited you are about your mission or about your vision, whatever. If you're not willing to do some of that basic blocking and tackling, again, the American football analogy, then you can't get out and play the game. It's just not going to happen. So I try to really help people understand those systems are super important. Now, there's other elements. There's a sacredness part to this work that I think really helps. There's a playful part to this work that I think really helps make the systems more palatable. So I can wake up on Monday morning and go, oh, I don't want to do the work that I have to do, but miracles are happening in people's lives when I engage with them. We have fun together. We play. They take me out on their boat. We go to their ski chalet, whatever the case may be. There are other elements that can allow you to come in that make this work like kind of off the charts amazing at times. It also can be really tough. Rejections are a flat out bummer. I mean, my goodness. You work hard, you think you've got a deal in the works, and it falls apart.
Expectations, yeah.
That's right. That's right. And so what I try to do is say, if you start with that internal piece, you pay attention not just to the hard work that you're doing, but also the spiritual work you're doing and the playful work that you're doing. This actually can turn into a very well-rounded career that is one that you actually wake up and you really look forward to. But it is interesting, a lot of my work with charity leaders and major gift fundraisers is pretty therapeutic.
Mm.
And I go to therapy every week. I say to my charity leaders and my fundraisers, get into therapy, do internal work. It is so important because a lot of the work you're doing is high stakes, and high stakes work can make for high stakes failures, and that's hard.
It's hard. And it's not only hard on the personal level, which I'm sure is the case. You know, I have a way of compartmentalizing things in life. And so I've been, I guess, fortunate not to have that kind of a fall, but I've seen it around me. And it is painful to watch. But it's not only painful to watch because a person, has that kind of rejection. They feel the rejection for the entire organization and the entire cause. They feel like they're letting down not the people that are, paying them to do fundraising work. They're letting down the people at the other end of the spectrum, of the giving
Yeah, the
spectrum.
beneficiaries.
That's
Yeah.
right, the people who you're there to help, the cause. And that I think can be such a weight because for the same person who really does believe in the cause of the organization, if they feel like they're not delivering, and there's just unfortunately it's very very it's painful. And that has to do with organizational development. And you talked about the systems and kind of looking beyond the individual. And I think maybe part of that therapeutic piece is actually understanding, one second, I'm not in this alone. Yes, the money's got to come through me, perhaps, but there maybe an
Do
organization
you
has to
have
shift.
people, yeah, do you have people that you can talk to about what you're going through? So doing this work in isolation, big red flag, big red. I have done that. I've done this work in isolation, and it was disastrous. It's not a good idea. You have to have people that you can talk to and that will understand. I also now, more than ever, Avi, I encourage in the Christian ministry side of things, but this can happen with any religion you're committed to, have a prayer ministry connected to your work. And so my work, I'm currently the director of advancement at a mission right now. Last week, I made a dedicated trip. I flew to go meet with somebody who's going to be the lead prayer intercessor specifically for development work. They're going to pray for the messaging of the work. They're going to pray for that God would move hearts and spirits. They're going to pray for our networking efforts. They're going to pray for proposals under consideration. They're going to pray for the givers, things that we know are happening in their lives. They're going to pray for spiritual protection. I mean, that is going to be a regular, that is the, any of all the work I do, that's some of the most real work that I do is that prayer effort that undergirds all of the financial development.
That's very, first of all, fascinating. And I've been in close proximity to Christian organizations of all sorts and have wonderful, wonderful friendships there. And I've seen, and this will come as a surprise to many, I have seen people, organizations, businesses that have a prayer intercessor on the campus. They have their own dedicated office. And what they do all day is they pray for the business. Okay. Um, People, I'm not familiar with that in the Jewish world, and which is where I come from. I've not seen that, and Jews, observant Jews, that we pray 3 times a day, but we don't pray in that way. And so I think that's just a fascinating dynamic, looking at what it is that you're doing with the organization, with the cause, because ultimately when we're giving, we're looking beyond ourselves, and so we're not only looking beyond ourselves towards the people that we're going to serve, but towards the creator who we serve in our day-to-day work and wanting to be in that kind of an alignment. So I think that's fascinating, Jay Paul, really.
Well, and I
Go
actually
ahead.
use, I don't have these off the top of my head, but I use Jewish names for God for each of the prayers. So the one I remember, the easiest one is Jehovah Jireh, the God of provision. And so it's saying, Creator, God of provision. We pray for all of the proposals under consideration and all the invitations that have been extended. We pray for favor and a radical release of resources for this work. And I can share with you because I use those names. I think they're so powerful because it's reflective of our Creator, all the various things that He will, come alongside us with.
It's fascinating because you talked before about the sanctity of the work, of the fundraising work. Indeed, in Jewish tradition, there's a sanctity to the names, and so part of me says, "Oh my gosh, Jay Paul, I need you to write this down, and we can give this as a cheat sheet to everybody." On the other hand, we actually don't even write down some of the names you just mentioned because they're so they're so
Oh, that's
they're so
interesting.
holy.
Okay.
And
Yeah, of course.
so,
Of
but
course.
we're getting off into a realm here, which I think is just underscoring this concept that there are deeper, broader things going on at all times. And on the one hand, wow, what a pressure that the fundraiser is feeling. On the other hand, they're not alone. And fundamentally, when you're looking out for other people, you are not alone. And to feel that you're alone is a misread of the landscape. And so thank you for that encouragement, Jay Paul, to everyone who's out there who's looking at this. Maybe one more question before we kind of get to how people can get in touch with you, Jay Paul. The question is, we looked at things now through the lens of the fundraiser, the director of advancement, the resource developer. What, from this posture that you've been able to experience for decades already, Jay Paul, what might be a word of advice that you might want to give to the donor? Now that perhaps they're hearing the inner challenges that the fundraiser is working through, how might they be cognizant of that when they're approached by someone?
Ah, yeah. Are you aware of what you have to contribute to the world today that is way beyond and way more important than your money? Your money is great. It's a tool. It's a blessing. There are many glories that can come of that. There's many depravities that can come from that. Be aware of that, aware of what money reveals about your true idols, so that you then can go out and actually really make a game changing contribution to the world around you. It's not just about your money. That's what I would say to the wealthy person.
So I always get, and thank you for that, Jay Paul. I always get back to purpose. I really do believe, and I guess maybe one more question for you is when we say you are what you give, what does that mean to you? Because in my worldview, the purpose of our lives has to do not with what we do for ourselves, but what we're contributing beyond. right? We've come to this world for a purpose. What might that be? And I think that's a really important question for us to ask each and every single day. But what does "you are what you give" mean to you, J. Paul?
Okay, so I think it starts with if you had nothing, what are you? I mean, I would kind of reverse engineer the question a little bit. If all of those trappings are gone, what are you? And if it's a shell of a person, that's not a shameful thing. It's good awareness. Go to work on that so that you can actually live a redemptive and miraculous presence. You know, as Paul would say this in the book of Timothy, the life that is truly life. That's when you find life that is truly life, is when you find your purpose aside from all those material trappings. If you find that, then now we can bring the material trappings back into the play because now they're in their proper place. They're not guiding they're not driving the ship, right? What's driving the ship is the purpose. Yeah.
Yes, right. There's the deeper purpose of what the person is all about, but then there are the tools, the resources that can then be channeled in the right direction. J. Paul, thank you so much for this, and I do want to make sure that people know you are a busy person. You've got a lot going on, and you've got your blog, and you've got your own podcast. J. Paul, how can people get in touch with you?
I love it. The best way is LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, and my name is unique enough that it'll show up right at the top of the list. So find that, send me a connection request. I will absolutely accept it. And then in that, I post every day just pro tips, reflections on major gift fundraising. I let you know whenever I write a weekly guide on. It's a freely available guide. Anything else I'm producing all gets promoted or talked about there on LinkedIn. So that is the core place. And then all of my weekly guides are also recorded I read them on my podcast. So you can listen to them or you can read them. And then from time to time, I do fun interviews like this with people as well. So
Well, it is fun, and every conversation that I've ever had with you, J. Paul, has been fun. I
back
think
at you.
we first met probably about, for us, it's the way I look at the world, everything is either pre-COVID or post-COVID,
I know.
pre-October 7 war or post-October 7 war.
I know.
And
I know.
so kind of in between all of that, we've had some conversations, and every conversation with you, J. Paul, has been a lot of fun. And
Thank
as
you.
always, you've always got more to contribute than even anticipated. So thank you so much. I really do believe that the people listening to this have gotten some meaningful insights, both into understanding the mind of the donor as well as, of course, the mind of the fundraiser. And hopefully that will help people on a pragmatic level, but just understanding a little bit. Guys, you're in a conversation. There's a real person on the other side of that conversation. They're going through something when you're having a conversation, especially a high stakes one. And let's make the most out of it, whatever the outcome might be. So, J. Paul, thank you so much. And I'm definitely looking forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you, Avi.
Before we close, I want to thank J. Paul for giving so generously of his time and for sharing decades of hard-won insight with honesty and humility. And that brings us to this week's Giving Challenge. So often, when we invite people to give financially, to volunteer, to pray, or to stand with a cause, we carry a hidden agenda, getting to a yes. This week's challenge is different. Choose the person, not the win. The next time you ask someone to give with you, to serve with you, or to pray with you, pay attention to them, not just to your outcome. Ask one sincere question before making a request. Listen without steering the answer. And if the answer is not now or not this, respond with respect, not pressure. If you can, help them clarify what they are called to give to. Point them toward a place that fits their season, even if it isn't yours. Or simply thank them for the conversation and leave the relationship intact. Because real generosity doesn't begin with a transaction, it begins with relationships. As we close, I want to thank Victoria Hurst, whose generosity and support make the You Are What You Give podcast possible. And thanks to you for watching or listening and for being part of this growing community. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. If this conversation resonates, please subscribe. It's a simple step that helps us share the word and build a community that values what we give more than what we take.